Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Good morning, listeners. We are season 2, episode 28 with Carline Crevecoeur coming from Boalsburg, Pennsylvania. And man, this is going to be an amazing episode. And first of all, where you can find our guest via her website. And I'm going to spell it out, but it's carlinecrevecoeur.com and CarlineCrevecoeur.com. And she also has an Instagram at CREVEY22. So a little bit about our guest, or a lot, because she has lived an amazing life. So just be patient for a second, but I'm going to get through this. Dr. Carline Crevecoeur is a Haitian-American retired board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist. Dr. Crevecoeur attended St. John's University, earning her bachelor's degree in chemistry. She received her medical degree from Downstate Medical School, where she went on to complete her obstetric and gynecological training. Her medical concentration was in perinatology, where she researched lung development and premature infants. She worked extensively with breast cancer patients and victims of sexual violence. During her residency, she traveled to Haiti, where she worked in General Hospital in Port-au-Prince and assisted in medical procedures. She returned to Haiti in 2010 after the earthquake to help with disaster relief efforts. After 20 years of medical service in New York and Pennsylvania, Dr. Crevecoeur gave up her career to raise and homeschool her 5 children. Although she had planned to return to her beloved profession after her children were grown, a cancer diagnosis in 2012 sidelined her plans and forced her to retire. Being a mover and a shaker, Dr. Crevecoeur used her time as a retiree to look back at her life and became an author. Her book, Pressure Makes Diamonds, is an inspiring memoir describing her journey and her choice to homeschool her 5 children. Dr. Crevecoeur is a 2-time cancer survivor. She speaks fluent French and Creole, enjoys reading, running, and listening to music while tending to her garden. Dr. Crevecoeur, thanks for your invaluable service to patients all over the world. Thanks for dedicating your life to your children and guiding them to give back to the world as you have. And thanks for taking the time out of your day to be a guest on Life's Essential Ingredients. With that, welcome to the show.
Oh, wow. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Listeners, we're in for a treat because in researching Dr. Crevecoeur, it's just, you're just genuine. And I love that you just speak your truth. And this is going to be a great episode. And we always start the episode with the thought of the day. And so the pressure is always on me. My pastor and I talk about this, and he gives me some insight. And then we pick the thought of the day. But we're season 2, episode 28. So we've done quite a few of these now. And we are 100% of the guest being like, yes, that quote fits me to the T. So I'm a little bit nervous over here, but here we go. And it's from Mahatma Gandhi. And here it is. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever.
That is beautiful.
It is beautiful.
That is me. You've captured me. And I am going to start using that as my tagline, because I think it really reflects my life. As you mentioned in the intro, I was diagnosed with cancer. And the second time I was a stage 4, given 11% chance of surviving. My 5-year survival was only 11%. They gave me, I think, 36 months. So in the beginning, I was terrified. I was depressed. I was, angry. I had all these feelings, and it caused a lot of problems in our household because my kids didn't know how to approach me. They didn't know what mood I was in. I didn't know myself. And after a while, I said, I can't live or die like this. I'm in that period of unknown, uncertainty. Tomorrow will be the day I'll die. Tomorrow will be the day that the aneurysm will burst in my head. And, I was living in fear. And so I said, no, I am not going to do this anymore. And at a point in time, halfway through my chemo treatment, I stopped. I told my husband I couldn't do this anymore. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die in dignity. And I need to live the rest of my life. And so once I stopped and the headaches went away and I felt myself again, I was living like I'm going to die tomorrow because I really thought I would. So this is why this is such an important quote that you took. And the second part of the learning is also beautiful because this is something I've always told my kids, never stop learning. I think when you stop learning, you die. And there is a quote, I believe, from Malcolm X, that Martin Luther King, that says something about when you don't speak up, you die. Like you should always be vocal in life, express your truths. And I would add to it that when you stop learning things, you die. You don't have any passion, anything, for learning, for music, for reading, for even meeting people. And so learning to me is a lifelong process. It never stops. I hope to go in my coffin or whatever with the book in my hand, like I want to read the last chapter.
Oh,
So
man.
that was a beautiful quote. So thank you for taking that. You've done your research about me, and it was great.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you're going to use it. I'm going to use that one as well. It really spoke to me. And then research, it was like, oh man, I don't need to go any further. And wow. So yeah, we're going to get in. I'm going to let it go, but yeah, I can't imagine having 11% chance of survival. And I can see how you went through, the stages of grieving and the anger and everything else that happens. And then you were able to just let that go and saw probably the expense that it was coming at your health and the health of your family. And then just were able to let it go. And I wasn't aware that you have or have an aneurysm as well. I know you had the colon cancer.
Yeah, I did have an aneurysm. What happened is that the medication that I was on caused me to have nosebleeds and everything else. And it was because the vessels throughout your body, especially the thin vessels, would burst. Because now that I was a stage 4, the assumption is that it's circulating throughout my body.
Yeah.
And so this Avastin, that's a known cause of a possible aneurysm, a vessel bursting in your brain. And I had horrible headaches every morning. It was just pounding. So I told my husband, this aneurysm is going to explode in my brain one day. It's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be the next day. So living in that fear was hard. And one thing you said about the stages of grief, or the stages of, there's really no stages. When I talk to my fellow cancer survivor or grief survivors, it goes back and forth. You go to denial, you wake up and you say, okay, I'm going to beat this thing. And then there's another part of you that's going to be, no, I'm not, in anger, and then acceptance. And then you said, okay, fine. I accepted this. Now what do I do? And then the anger comes back. And so you go in and out of these stages. It's not chronological, it's not a stepwise fashion. You come in and out, and eventually you start when you really get to acceptance phase, then that's it. And I think I went through all of those stages. And at the end, when I stopped my chemo, that was when I really became in the acceptance phase. And that's when I lived, and this is what I write in my book. As I prepared to die, I lived.
Mm-hmm. Man, right back to that quote. Well, I love it. I love it. And thanks for getting the clarity on that. And yeah, I totally agree. You're not aware, but I worked 29 years as a nurse. And so I've been through those 5 stages quite a bit with families. And yeah, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just our emotions take over, and just trying to have a good support network to help people
Right.
work through all those different stages and in no particular order. So yeah, let's get into you. So I know you were born in Haiti. What was life like growing up? Take that any which way you want, from one to whenever you came to the U.S.
Okay, well, as you could see from my accent, I can't, no one picks up my Creole accent because I left Haiti when I was 2. In fact, a lot of people would pick up a New York accent. Oh, you're a New Yorker.
Yeah, I
which,
definitely hear that. Yeah.
which I've been a New Yorker for like the 20 years of my life before I moved to Pennsylvania. So yeah, I left Haiti when I was 2, but I came to this country when I was 5 because my father had scholarships to go to different countries. So we lived in Africa for a year, we lived in France for a year, and then we settled into the United States by the time I was 5. Out of my siblings, I was the only one that traveled with my parents because my mom wanted a child with her. She had 5 kids, and my little brother was too young, and my older brothers and sisters were already in school. And so I was like the perfect choice, like the Goldilocks. So I got to travel with my family, and my parents speak about it all the time, my dad especially. But yes, I came to this country in New York, Brooklyn, New York to be exact, at the age of 5. And that basically is like in the beginning of my book where I talk about the racism. The kids that we were the first Black family to move in that area, and the kids were not very accepting, and they called us names, threw rocks at us. And until we stood our ground, until we fought back, we didn't get the respect that we deserve as human beings. And I just never understood why the kids didn't like us. I was anxious to meet other kids, and unfortunately, it's parenting, I think. If they don't like us certain things, you right now, if I'll take my nephew to a park and there are white kids and Hispanic kids, and they just play along. I mean, it would be so beautiful if we could be all kids again and not care, because kids are so amazing. And but these kids didn't like us, and it had a lot to do, I guess, with their parents. The parents never said anything to my parents, not that I know of, not that they shared with us, but the kids were rude and mean, and and calling us names. And only after we had to fight our way, which is unfortunate that violence is what we had to resort to, because this is something that I don't really particularly care for. But there's so much violence around us, but that's why they stop bothering us. And so when people say violence is not the answer, I don't know. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes it's your only choice, which is sad. Um, and then we became friends. Then, the kids realized, like, why were we even arguing with them? And eventually the white kids moved out of the neighborhood. More Blacks and Hispanics kids moved in. And I love my neighborhood. I love growing up in New York.
Man, well, sorry that you had to go through that, but it definitely sounds like you figured out a way to deal with it, stood your ground, and then people eventually kind of wised up and realized, hey, they're no different than you and I. And I totally agree with it was a learned behavior. In one of the quotes, I'm not going to get into it, and it's a long one, I don't remember it, but I have a picture of Nelson Mandela behind me that talks about, hey, kids are taught to hate. And they have love inside them naturally. And we need to bring that out. And yeah, so totally agree. But obviously, your parents valued education, and I know you have, your 5 siblings. But talk about how that inspired you perhaps to take the path that you did in your educational journey. And I know that's so important to you with all the work that you do. I don't know if you're currently on the school board or not anymore, but we'll
I
get into
am.
that. But talk about how, because it does relate in a weird way to your comments about the racism of it was a learned behavior. Obviously for you and your siblings and then your children, it was a learned behavior to value education. So talk about how that was instilled into your family, and then how perhaps it led to the choices that you made for your kids.
So growing up, I had to deal with racism and sexism. because unfortunately, a lot of third world countries still value, and I guess not even third world country, men in general. And so my mom wanted to go back to school, but for her, it was harder because she was the caretaker, but she also worked. My mom worked so hard. My father also worked hard, but he went back to school and he got his master's. And he got his master's in economics. And college was free in those days. He got it from Brooklyn College, and he eventually wanted to go back for his PhD. And I think he was accepted in Columbia. So education was always seen as important more for my brothers. I remember when I told my dad that I wanted to be a doctor, he says, well, I'm not paying for this. Where my brothers went to medical school, and that was fine. But he says, women are just going to get married and quit their jobs and take care of the kids. So why should we spend any money on education? And, he really meant it. Of course, once I became a doctor, oh, my daughter, the doctor, he's telling everybody this. But I had to work. And we all did. My family was not rich, but at least my brothers, I think, got more encouragement in going to school than we did. But we all knew how important education was, and we all saw my dad working and studying. And so the value of education was not directly instilled in us, but we all knew that it was important. We knew that we had to get good grades and we had to do our homework, and especially coming from a different kind of school system. I don't think my parents even understood grades, they never went to a parent teachers meeting. And that's something that I bring up a lot in our school board, because cultures are different. There's a lot of different cultures where my parents felt that they'll take care of the home education, the manners, all these other stuff in the home. The teachers were supposed to take care of the educational stuff, the math, the English, the subjects. And so contact us if there's a problem. If there's no problem, then why do we need to meet you? Mm-hmm. And so for certain cultures, if you don't show up for parent-teacher conference, it wasn't because you didn't care about your kids. It was because there was no point. And so this is something that we're trying to communicate to our community about the importance of culture, about the importance of parent-teachers meeting, is because it's good to get to know your teachers. It's good to get to know your parents and any questions that you may have. And I think society is kind of changing on that aspect, but because we live by a university and sometimes we have a lot of foreign teachers that are visiting or whatever, they come with their family, and the kids do attend the school district. And I say it's very important to understand the cultures of the kids that will be teaching.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's all, again, this goes back to the learned behavior. Everything does start in the home. And if we could get parents to slow down and for everybody to just do their job, and I love how you were instilled the proper manners that will get you to school, and then be able to do your job as a student, be receptive to the learning of the teachers. But I do think, maybe you just had a different viewpoint from your parents of being, and this is going to sound really bad and maybe even weird, but let me take a step back. We've hosted 3 students through Rotary Youth Exchange, a student from Switzerland, a student from France, and a student from Colombia. And then I just had a young lady from Latvia who I coached, and I've also coached a young lady from Italy. And so I only have experience with 5 students, but in every last case, they come here and they say that the students in the U.S., and I'm generalizing, but they don't have the same appreciation of the educational opportunities that are surrounded by them, and they just kind of take for granted that they can go to school and be taught. And I don't know how we change that in the U.S. Whether, I don't even know if you agree with it, but are you making sense of what I'm trying to describe?
I do. I think that sometimes we've gotten a lot of things for granted here. And I think that was one of Oprah Winfrey. I think when she started her girls' school in Africa, one of the reasons is because she felt that they would be more appreciative, because we do get complacent and, of how things always been, and we take it for granted. And I don't know if that's a bad thing per se, um, I think that we should always be trying to doing our best regardless. But I think, especially in this country, it's the richest country in the world, I think we should expect these things. I think we should expect more. Um, um, I'm using kind of my spouse as an example when I say, "Oh, you take me for granted," and he says, "And it feels good." Like, I know who you are, and I'm comfortable with that. But at the same time, I want him to, you don't want this comfortable, I want more, and I think that in life, you should always want more, because I think that's what makes us better. You
Yeah.
know, we would have, be comfortable with being in a cave, but somebody says, no, I want more. I want to feel warm. I want, a better bed. I don't want to sleep on the floor. And I think that helps us evolve. It helps us to imagine a lot of things, So I don't think we should ever be complacent. I think the bare minimum, yeah, we should expect that, but we should always want more.
Yeah. And I love that. And I totally agree. And again, this is going to come out wrong because I'm generalizing, because there are so many students. I was just spent the last 2 days up at Orland High School working with the freshman and sophomore classes, doing some leadership development, doing some incredible work. And the students were amazing. But I still feel like we're just not always in the space. And part of that is going through the process of being young and not even being fully aware of what's going on and having so many other distractions. But I know I'm going to move on from that. But I want to get into your work real quick as a school board member. And I know when you running, I think it was back in 2019 or something on the web, I saw some piece, but your focus was on a quality education for all students. What does that mean for you?
I feel like we should all be accepting and understanding how all kids work. And my kids were on the high level. My kids were amazing. And this is why I had to kind of quit my job and homeschool them, because the area that I was in was a disservice to my kids. They were a waste of time. And we all know that smart kids could get in real big trouble, and they become delinquent if they're bored, if they're not stimulated. And this is what I was trying to convey to the principal, the superintendent, but they wouldn't listen to me. And for various reasons that I got into the book, that I felt that my voice was not being heard. And so you get these remark all the time that, oh, your kids are so smart, they're doing well, we don't have to worry about them, we need to worry about the kids that are failing. That's not true. I think that we need to help all our kids, the kids that are, on the high level. We need to stimulate them. We need to engage them. And the kids that are struggling, we need to help them. And everybody says, well, we'll teach in the middle. And sometimes you end up not doing anyone any good, because there's a lot of kids that doesn't really fit in the middle. And so that was what I was originally talking about when I said a school that works for all people, for everyone. But now, especially with CRT and all these other stuff in the news and the inclusiveness, it made me reflect on how I went to school and I was the only Black kids in the school. And when, we talked about racism or slavery, because that's the only thing that Black people could contribute to education, the slavery part, a lot of the kids would turn around and look at me, like, okay, how do you feel about that? Like, and you feel so uncomfortable. And so I believe that we want to enlighten all our students about Black excellence, about things that we've contributed besides slavery. I think that every person needs to feel some kind of dignity, some kind of being proud of who they are. You know, um, there was all these debates about Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, and the whole idea was that you can't go home and take off your Black suit. We're Black all the time. And there were other books written about Black fatigue, about how you should act, how should you wear your hair in white spaces. And all of that takes a toll, on just being Black, on just trying to live your life. And so my my original statement about school that works for everybody talked about kids on different levels of intelligence. But then I enlarged it more to incorporate kids from a lot of diverse background, that they need to see themselves in the curriculum. They need to see themselves in stories. They need to read about themselves like, this is me, and feel happy. So we're not saying anything bad about other kids. We're just wanting to be more inclusive learning environment so that kids could feel happy and safe and comfortable, because that's how kids learn. That's how all kids learn.
Yeah, and I love everything that you're sharing. And definitely, we just had a guest on the show. It hasn't aired yet, but and I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know. I needed to research it more, but it's this Colby Index, and it's basically a methodology for a strengths-based approach, which is really what you did for your children. You realize, hey, my children, here's my children's strengths, because you were able to slow life down and really listen to your kids and understand your children and say, all right, well, they're not allowed to play to their strengths in this current system. And so you said, I'm going to have to create the system for myself. And that's going to be in my home. And I can allow them to play to their strengths. And I would love to get into that in a little bit. But how do we take what you did? Because unfortunately, the world is moving fast. Parents are having to work too much, and they can't homeschool their kids. And how can we, especially in your role as a board member, take the strengths of our students and allow that to be in mainstream education? And that is such a difficult task, especially with, you have one teacher for 35 kids, and you have 35 kids that potentially all have a different gift. And I'm going to use that gift and strength as the same. And how do we take this difficult subject matter and then allow the students to bring that to life within this framework? And so I'm really curious, because I think we're just getting education wrong. And I think somehow we need to hurry up and get it right, because COVID is a great opportunity for us to say, all right, we've been doing this wrong for the last 40, 50 years. Let's fix it. But how would you suggest we do that?
That is such a beautiful question. And like you, I admire what teachers do. And sometimes people talk to me and they say, well, you homeschool your kids, you must not think that teachers are doing what they need to do. I said, no, I think teachers overwork. I think it's a lot. I had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to start my lesson plans for my kids, review the stuff for them. It's exhausting. And I only had 5. I only had 5. Talk about having 30 kids in your classroom. But I think that we are learning, especially like you said, from COVID, that for the virtual environment, some kids, some of the autistic kids, some of the ADHD kids, they actually did better. Not every kid did badly in the virtual setting. And so we're looking at that to see if we could give that as an option. I think the social aspects of community with kids is important. So we may make one day a week for all our virtual students to come together. We are having, it's not an alternative school, but this Delta program that we have at our high school, where kids are kind of empowered to set up their curriculum. They talk to teachers with their first name one-on-one. I don't know if I agree with that totally, but and they have community period where they come together as a group and discuss different things that they would like to see in the lunchroom. They vote on things, more healthy snacks, and they vote on things, and they learn the process of protesting and speaking up for what they want. And I think it's beautiful. And so a lot of people kind of like this alternative pathways, because we know that there's several different pathways for kids. And I think that a lot of schools are realizing it, and I think they're trying. Now being on the school board, some of the incomings that we get, and I'm reading it, is probably a letter that I could have written myself, but now being on the school board, I realize it's not that easy. And I think that we need to communicate with the public about what it entails in the school board, because a lot of people think the money spent in school goes straight to teachers, and like, but it doesn't. It goes to, people don't like their kids going in crumbling and paint leaded, infested buildings. We have to clear that up. We have to clear the roof. We have to make sure there's like, we want a comfortable settings for our kids. We have to pay for that. We want insurance in case they get hurt or injured. We have to pay for that. The cybersecurity now is a big threat, and it's hurting all school districts. We have to pay for that. We have to pay for pensions. We have to pay for, so all that, has to be taken in perspective, that we don't want to keep raising taxes. And I think how schools are funded is very important, that people don't realize. And so when we raise taxes, people up in arms and angry, but yet we want all these things for our kids, and sometimes it's just really hard.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And we're going to move on from this because I want to get into you a little bit more personally. But yeah, I think my 2 cents, we just talk about how we value youth, we value education, but at the end of the day, we don't really put our money into that. And I think we need to, and Mike and I are ex-athletes, played Division I college basketball. Mike's a high school coach. I coached high school, still coaching high school. And so we love athletics. But I just think it's crazy the amount of money as a country that we put into that, and then we don't put it into so many other areas that we value. And there's just got to be a better way to get this thing right. But let's totally change gears. This show is called Life's Essential Ingredients. And what would you say, what's kind of your routine? What are some of your life's essential ingredients right now at this point in your life that you could share with the listeners? And I'll clarify what that means of, hey, what are the best things that you're doing for yourself personally right now? Maybe like a routine that you could share. Obviously you love to learn. And so maybe some books that you're reading, any insight you can share with the listener to kind of help them. Maybe this is something that I could do and incorporate into my life.
So you mentioned right away my love for reading. I like creativity and I like persistence. These are my 3 things in life. As far as learning and reading, I was at one point in 5 different book clubs. One of them I did with my own kids and my extended family, so that we could kind of touch base with each other. And because my kids are all spread around the country now, and this was a way of keeping us united and talking about a book. But then finals came around and things came around and we kind of slacked off. But reading, and it's not even things you like. And this is the reason why I like book clubs so much, because it lets me read books that I would never thought I would like, and I guess this is the things that people are talking about too with the news now. When we're just focused on the news that we want to hear, we're talking to the people we want to talk to, that's going to give us a feedback of what we already expect. We're not learning anything. And so I love, and when we have a book in my various book clubs, I don't read what it's about, because I want to be surprised. I don't read the reviews. I want to come up with my own idea. And I love book clubs because then some things that I didn't consider, it's something that somebody else brought up, and so it's engaging. I have this book club where the people that are there are like 80-year-olds. I mean, I call it my old women's book club. And then of course I have my younger book club. And it was so interesting that we read the same book for both book clubs, but the impact, the things that the older women picked up from that was so different from the younger women. And it's the same book. And because it had a backdrop of World War II, and they were saying, well, I remember when my father did this, and they're older people, and some of them were immigrants, and and they remember rationing food, insights that the younger generation didn't know. We only read that in books, and so even reading the same book but getting different perspective on it, you're still learning. And so learning is a big thing to me. I remember when my kids were dual enrolled in the high school, and for some reason I was taking my kids out of school, and I was talking to the teacher, and they said, you have to fill this form because if it has to be educational. And I said, everything is educational. I could make eating an apple educational, the vitamins in it, the esophagus, the chewing, the, so to me, everything is learning, everything is education. You just have to take the time and process this information. So with books that I read a variety of books. I like reading books from different authors around the country. I like reading political books, but there was this one book that we read, I think while all the Black students sitting in one part of the cafeteria, um, by Dr. Tanum, I believe, Tatum. And that was a very enlightening book because we're trying to form all these affinity groups now based on that book. And it's been out for a while, and reading it brought me back to my time when I was going to school. And yes, you're right. There was all these Black kids sitting together, and white kids always complain, why? Why are they sitting there? Because I felt that was one time that we kind of felt we could be ourselves, even though we had different backgrounds, but we had the complexion, the same. So that made us a group. But not every time, at different parts of your life or different days, could you read books like that? Anti-racist books. Sometimes you just want a book to escape. You just want a fairy tale. You want a happy ending. You want to know the ending, And so this is why I'm reluctant to give books, because I think that every book has something to offer, to teach to the same person at different parts of their life. If I was going through my cancer treatment, the last thing I needed was really reality about how the world is crumbling, how climate change is destroying us. Sometimes you can't read those books, and sometimes you just want to put them away. So I just like reading a variety of books, and I think book clubs is a way to do it, not because it's also engaging and it's a social activity, but it also introduces you to things, books, authors that you never thought of. This month, April, and I talk about that in my memoir about Poetry Month, where my kids had to write poems, and we wrote all kinds of poems, and we had this big tree, and we call it the poetry, and this is where we wrote our poems, and we would staple it, and Dad would come home and read the different poems that we wrote, or we had to memorize some poems. And so I belong to a group that decided to start writing poems for this month, and I haven't done that since my kids were little. And I'm thinking, why didn't I used to love poems, and I want to be engaged in that again. So I went to this book reading where she read her poems, and they were so beautiful. And, and I raised my hand and I asked, I've always thought about being a poet, but I think that their prose, their words are so beautiful, I could never do it. And she said, do you think we just sit down and just write it up one day? You don't think we go back and just like with your memoir, with drafts? And I was like, no, I didn't think that. I thought it was just inspirational. You see a beautiful tree, just want to write it down and everything comes out. And she says, no, it's a craft like every other craft in writing. We revise and draft and revise. And she was saying that this book took me 4 years. And I was like, that's like my memoir, And so it's doable. So many things that we don't do in our life is a fear, I think, or we can't do it well. We can't do it like them. And we are afraid of trying, and we talk ourselves out of it without even giving it a try. So I said, okay, I will do that. So I started doing that this month, and it's been great. It's been a relaxing thing to do. And after this month is over, I'll go back and revise. And but it was just a nice way. And she says 5 minutes a day. In the morning you get up and you just write. She calls like the dramatic writing. It doesn't have to rhyme. It's just whatever you're feeling. And there's different topics. The one she gave us was when the dead returns. And so I took that and I ran with it, and I thought it was so beautiful. You could do it as the dead returns in war. They were heroes. They never got their due. As the dead returns, after the climate destroys, and then they were warning us about it. There were so many, ways that you could write that as inspiring, or has the dead returned, you know, in in a way that was a warning to us, or children that are died before they were supposed. There's so many ways you could, and the creativity behind it. And that was my other thing. Never stop being creative. Never stop trying to think like kids, magical, because it's not what keeps you young. I'm not going to go that far, but I think it's what makes life interesting. And with the learning things, so many research have shown that the more you learn in life, either another language, another instrument, engaging with other people, even if you have some brain disease, which with the chemo, I don't know about me. Sometimes this is why I want to be engaged all the time. You develop neurons around that. The brain is so plasticity. Um, it takes a lot of energy, and if the brain is going to suck up all that energy, watching television versus being active, you get a little bit more when you're doing something creative. But your brain is also alert because you have to make sure nobody's entering your home. Or so regardless of what you're doing, the brain takes about 20% of your energy that you would take for the rest of your body. And your brain is like a small 3 pounds, so it takes much more than the rest of the body does. And I look at it this way: if your brain's going to take that much energy, you might as well make it work. You might as well learn things, you might as well make it efficient. So for all these reasons, I definitely believe that learning is so important.
I love it. I love it. And unfortunately, I didn't get to read your book, but that's we're almost out of time here. But let's get into share the highlights of that. And first of all, just congrats. I think so many people have the inspiration to want to write a book, but then life happens and it just doesn't happen. So yeah, big hats off to you and congratulations. I know that had to feel good. Your book, Pressure Makes Diamonds, love the title. But share with whatever you want on that with the listeners, and then hopefully they can get out and purchase that.
Okay. The full title is Pressure Makes Diamonds: From Homeschooling to the Ivy League, Parenting Story. And that title took a long time because I was debating a lot. The backdrop is definitely homeschooling, but homeschooling is not done in a vacuum. And so someone that read, I was giving this talk and they bought my book, and afterwards they contacted me through my website. And that's another thing. I answer all my emails, so feel free to contact me. And she said, I came to your book reading and you were so engaging that I picked up your book. But honestly, homeschooling is not something that ever appealed to me, nor do I want to do it. But it talked about life, and this is why I call it a parenting story. It's not really about homeschooling. It definitely is what we did. But in it, we have the Haiti earthquake. I had 9/11, but I had to pull that out. But, we had we had the Arab Spring, because to me, learning is, again, not done in a vacuum. And when kids want to know different things of why this is happening, this is a learning moment for you. This is when you teach them why this happened and what could have been done to prevent it. And you let them answer the question, is there any way that this could have been prevented? What led up to this? And and then they'll do research. A lot of the assignment that I gave my kids to do, they hit it out of the park. I mean, it was nothing that I would have thought they would do. They went to the internet, they read books, they ordered things, and it was just amazing. And so even though it's homeschooling, but it's, again, it covers 20 years of doing this. And in 20 years, there's so many things that happen in our world, in our environment, in our country that kids want to know. And if you're not the one to teach them, if you're not the one to talk about it, they may read a lot of false facts or misinformation, or at least not the complete information. So this is why, to me, the homeschooling part, I had to add the Ivy League stuff. That was another thing that I wanted to, I don't want to brag, but I wanted to show that kids, all kids, especially Black kids, because I think we're underestimated, could be the pinnacle of education. And so I not putting other schools down, but when you think of Harvard, when you think of MIT, when you think of that, you think of, wow, this is amazing. And so I wanted to say that, yeah, giving the right environment, giving a loving environment, a safe environment, encouraging your kids, challenging them, they can go to the Ivy League. So I just didn't want to make it sound like it was just my kids. Just wanted to make it sound like education is important. And if you instill that in your kids, if you instill the confidence that they could achieve, they will achieve. And then the parenting story, I had to add that at the end because I didn't want this to be a how-to guide to my kids to Ivy League, and I've had people from Australia actually telling me this, how do I get my kids to the Ivy League? And I wanted to come back and say, that was my approach. And in the back of the books, it's not an index, it's a notes. And every book that I use, every blog or website that I use, I credit these people and I write it down. And I hope that that will help you. But I didn't want to say that I had the definitive answer to how all kids get to the Ivy League. That was not. That's work for my kids. And there was this lawyer family that wanted me to homeschool their kids. And I said, you're missing the point. The point is that I know my kids. I know their strengths and weaknesses. I know how much to pressure them. And pressure plays a very important part in the book because because so many people told me, oh, you're putting too much pressure on your kids. And I said, you don't know my kids. You don't know how much pressure they can take or cannot take. So how dare you tell me about my kids? I should tell you about my kids. And so, and all my kids were different and they are different till this day. And so I knew those that I had to back off because they're doing their own thing and they're going to get it done. Where those I had to say, come on, this is due tomorrow. You need to get to work on this, and all kids are different. So this is why at the end of the day, I use all of the three. I use these two subtitles because I think they were important in conveying my message about the book.
Well, I love it. Again, you can check out, she has her own website, Carline Crevecoeur. And again, it's CarlineCrevecoeur.com. Make sure you get there to check it out. We always end every episode with our legacy question. And there's a great quote, since you're a big quote person, I am too, by John Alston, that says, the only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. Let's fast forward 50 years from now. You are on your deathbed. You've lived an incredible life. You're surrounded by love. What is it that you want those that have been in your life to feel when you take your last breath?
Oh, God, that's so beautiful. First and foremost, I want to, when I introduce myself as a mother. Because yes, I love my husband very much. We've been married for almost 30 years. I love my siblings, but my role as a mother, I think that has made me who I am. The creativity, the love, everything I feel for my kids. I guess they made me a better person, I think. Selfless, and I was their first teacher. And although they dual enrolled, but I still taught them so much about life. And I want to be remembered by that. Carlene Crevecoeur, a mom, my children's first teacher.
Oh, so beautiful. My Pasha, you had him mesmerized. Pashito, get us out of here, baby.
Yeah, I just sat here listening. Absolutely incredible story about your life and all the different paths you have taken. And when you're telling the story, you're so humble about it and you make it sound like anyone can do it. And I know I can't do it, but I appreciate you taking the time to tell us the story. It was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. And your children and your husband are very lucky to have you in their lives. And thank you for sharing with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this.
All right. Well, listeners, again, thank you. We're in 33 countries. Cannot believe that. Season 2, episode 28. We've had our amazing guest, Carline Crevecoeur, on, just talking about her life's essential ingredients. And just as we always do it, boom, baby, that just happened. We out.